Next up, you see the Web API transition guide on your tables that you helped us build here at RESO. We have two speakers to come up and talk about Web API transition. We've got Mathew Kallumadil and Everett. Please come on up.
Good morning. Test. Yes.
All right, we're good.
Morning. Hey. So, welcome everyone. Thank you, Sam, for volunteering us to present here. I really appreciate that. How many of you in the crowd here still offer REDS as an option? Quite a few. Quite a few. Okay. So most MLSs actually now have at least an offering of Web API, so that's good. But it's astonishing that still a lot of people are struggling maybe to make that transition. But before we kind of get into that, I want to kind of introduce ourselves.
So I'm Kim Everett. I am the CEO of a small regional MLS in Western Arizona called WARDEX. We have about 1,000 members, and we were fairly early adopters. So we actually transitioned 100% in June of 2022.
Excellent. My name is Mathew. I'm with Stellar MLS. We are based in Orlando, and we have about 82,000 customers. And the reason why we wanted to kind of do this is we have a smaller MLS and a bigger MLS, and to see kind of the contrast, maybe if there are any, for you to learn from. Sam, in our pre-call, Sam, I had this great idea saying, okay, hey Sam, wouldn't it be a great idea if I mention all the why nots? And he's like, yeah, as long as you shoot them all down, right? And I said, well, okay. But I thought about this, and my hesitation was a little bit that the reasons why not are kind of mainly technical. Strategically, though, it's very, very clear. You should be moving to offer APIs and get your consumers converted. And the reason is really this. It's interoperability. That's what it boils down to. There's different aspects. It is for all the stakeholders, actually, that work with data. So that is the MLSs and the associations. That is the customers and agents. And that is also the vendors. For MLSs, really, if you do not offer REDS, as the name suggests, Real Estate Transaction Standard, is only for this industry. It builds a wall around you. And by having this wall around you, you're not welcoming any other technology outside this world. There's a lot of cool tech, AI, I had to mention it, all that stuff out there that's not welcome to come to us and help us out. Okay, so that's for MLS leadership. For consumers, it's obvious, right, the choice that they can get with now plugging into anything they want to, right? API, it's known, it's all out there. And for vendors, yes, for the incumbent vendors that have their infrastructure set up on REDS, yes, there's going to be more competition and it's going to be a cost. But there are some cost savings there too. For example, hiring. You don't need a REDS expert anymore to build stuff. You can contract companies, and you can build solutions that only require an API connection, nothing specialized. So there are some real strong benefits around making that transition. We also wanted to talk about our own kind of stories of how we made the transition. Stellar, by the way, also fully transitioned. We don't offer REDS at all around the same time frame.
So again, we can just throw Sam under the bus. I've only been in the MLS industry about 2 years. So one of the very first conferences I went to, Sam stood up on stage and said, we should be all moving to Web API. So I went back to my board and said, so this really smart guy said we're supposed to be doing this. And so we jumped, and it wasn't really as hard. I think I kind of feel like I'm a little bit of a poster child for the small MLS that could, because the reality was, I went back, we talked to the board. Sorry, I'm recovering from bronchitis. had a conversation, and then I just reached out to Trestle and said, how do we do this? You guys have this fabulous package now that is your project guide to do it. We didn't have that. So we jumped in and we just communicated a lot with them. We sent a note, let them know this was the timeline. We gave them a year, basically, and said, okay, here it is. We're going to roll it out January. You have the access to Web API. We'd like to see everyone transition by June. If you don't, there'll be a cost savings for those of you that do. And then everyone, by December of 2023, it's going to be gone. We will no longer have the RETs for you. I'm a parent, and Love and Logic is kind of something we do. So you had option A and B. And so every time a vendor came back with, but what about option C? What about, you know, X, Y, and Z, and I can't do this and I can't do that. We really just stood our ground and said, you have option A and you have option B. Which would you like to do? And we helped work through those problems with them. But again, we leaned heavily on Trestle. I cannot say enough for those guys over there because they really helped make this process happen. But we just made the commitment to do it and then really worked with our boards to make sure that everyone understood the why behind it. And I will tell you, in that year now, when we have vendors come and ask us, can we do something? It's really easy. The first question they ask is, are you still using RETs? I'm like, no, I'm 100% web API. They're like, oh, okay, good. This will be easier, right? So we're able to pick up and start moving with new technology much faster than we could before.
And Kim, what kind of challenges did you have during that transition that maybe?
Probably the biggest one was a few of the vendors had built their systems specifically for the RET system, right? So they had to modify the system. They knew they had to do it. It was just a matter of someone telling them, finally, you have to do it. And I think because we've already done it and done that hard work, they're ready for everybody else. They don't have to go rebuild a system. There's probably a few of those brokerage houses that have somebody in-house that isn't ready, but most of, you know, from a small MLS perspective, most of our brokers are using a service to put that feed onto their sites. And because they are using those systems, those big vendors have all moved. And they're just a matter of just telling them, hey, we're ready to go. So we've done that, I think. But that was probably the biggest one, was just a few of those. And we we worked with them about timelines and how do we get them where they needed to be. But it was fairly open conversation. Nobody really pushed back too hard. And when they pushed back, again, it was option A or B, which would you like to do? And they all managed to kind of work with us within that system.
Excellent. At Stellar, a similar story in some sense, only that we have had an internal team that could help with the transition. So thank you to, if they're listening, Michael, Pedro, and Chris, who really made this a smooth transition. But we took about a year as well. I think we could have done it in 6 months. We had some delays in between for different reasons. In terms of challenges, really, we didn't have any, I would say, for the most part. A lot of communication, just made it very clear about the deadlines, etc. There were some who, you still get that email saying, oh, I didn't know about it. I'm like, how? How is that even possible? And but the one thing that where we did make an exception, and it was a corner case, was that RETs at the time, compared to API solutions out there, offered documents. And APIs couldn't offer those attached documents in the listing. So for this one case, and there was literally just 1 out of 400, we said you can continue for a little bit longer until we move to the API. When they offer that too, then you have to move as well. And that worked out okay. But overall, similar kind of story. It's all about communicating, I think, in this case. And it's really not that hard, especially because a lot of the MLSs out there have kind of done that legwork, and a lot of the vendors, thank you, who've made the transition, are already there. Excellent.
All right.
So, this slide was about...
all the tech stuff.
Well, this slide was about kind of what is the main reason why you wouldn't do that, and it was kind of, why fix something that's not broken? That's kind of the argument that you hear, especially from the vendor space, right? And I kind of already mentioned a lot of the arguments why you should make that move. Really, I think from a technology perspective, what it opens up to you in terms of moving to using a globally recognized cross-industry standard, it is really immeasurable, really. You can plug and play from a development perspective. And that's about it. And the final note, kind of what you need to focus on. You've got that guide, it's really good. We were talking just before the session, we wish we had this guide. It would be really kind of useful. But the key points, I think, out of those, I'm going to take the first and you take the last one, okay? Is focus on your data consumers. You have different ones, right? You have the big vendors, big website creators, but then you also have the in-house brokerage data consumers that maybe struggle with that, right? So talk to them, reach out to them. If you have an in-house team, really have them communicate out. If not, then leverage your API vendors or your MLS system providers.
Yeah, no, make sure your leadership's on board. I mean, we had lots of conversations because some of those brokerages, they would reach out to board members and folks, and then if we weren't all on the same page, explaining it, or I have a board member who was like, I don't know why we're doing it, we're just supposed to, right? So making sure that they really have the story and that elevator speech to support it. So if there is somebody that pushes back, that your entire leadership understands this is why we're doing it, and we're doing it because we are going to be more flexible. We can move faster. We are going to bring better data and be in this field together rather than just being on the slow end of this train.
Absolutely. And yeah, totally, kind of piggybacking on that. Once that call comes from a random or very vocal broker or agent or vendor, do not crumble in your leadership. Stay focused there. The communication we talked about, partner with the API vendor, and then deadlines.
Just be ruthless.
Yeah,
I mean, that's my key, is I just told people no. And honestly, I think it was hilarious, because Tressel was like, so-and-so, and I'm like, yeah, no. We have a deadline, we're gonna make the deadline. And you are in the power control seat of, let's move this forward. There's no reason that we're still dragging our heels, right? Just step in and go. And I was surprised. I mean, honestly, 2 years and I'm sitting up here trying to explain why you should do this. I still am a little amazed, but it wasn't that hard as long as you just stuck to your guns and just said, this is my deadline, and here you go. And it worked. It honestly worked. 6 months, we were transitioned. I had a couple outliers that we were working on with just programmatic stuff. It wasn't anything like difficult. It was just they needed a little extra time to program on their end. But I was amazed at how many of the big vendors weren't prepared to move, but we made them move. So we've already made them move. Now all you guys need to do is let them know and communicate, hey, we're gonna do this, and let's go. And you can have it done 6 months.
Absolutely. 6 months, easy. Kind of as a final note on this, we are not the only industry that's kind of going through these kind of transitions. If you attended CMLS's Bring It to the Table last week, there was one session with T3. Jack Miller mentioned how the telecoms industry, or the cell networks, used to be kind of these small, contained clubs, so to speak, that you had to sign up for. And they kind of realized it doesn't really help the consumer ultimately. And they kind of started developing a standard that you can now use what you have right now with your mobile network, right? You can go anywhere, you can roam anywhere, etc. So that was a really good example of how an industry kind of opened up to that. Another good example is actually the banking industry. They're facing even a tougher time right now with decentralized finance. But similarly, banks used to keep it all internal. They had their internal technologies, and it was very hard to interact with those banks and those the transactions, really. Once they opened up to API, and that initiative in the banking industry was more regulation that drove it, but it worked out well. That ultimately led to all these fintech companies to pop up. And that's why you have Venmo and Zelle, and you have digital wallets like Apple Pay. All of this kind of came out of the fact that they were API enabled. It's easier to enter the market. You have a lot more competition, yes, but also better products out there. So My advice to you is like, don't wait around, embrace it, and let's move on. Thank you.